Hi, everyone. We just have some folks who are joining us virtually, just connecting to audio. So I'm just stalling for a moment, but it looks like folks are getting there. So welcome. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Danielle Johnson. I'm the Senior Director for Grants and Programs at the Central New York Community Foundation. And one of my tasks is to bring workshops like this to you, our nonprofit partners. I'm thrilled to have Tom and Christine joining us again. They are just a wealth of knowledge about all things plan giving and endowments in our community. And so they have a lot to share with you. I will just make a note, and I'll remind you at the conclusion of this as well, that you will be receiving an email with a survey link. And it's really important that you take this super brief survey because it does let us know what is of interest to you so that we can keep bringing you this programming. So with that said, I will let Tom and Christine tell you a little bit about themselves and get started with their presentation. Welcome.
Thanks, Danielle. For the people that are in the physical room, there are snacks and drinks down at one end. And if you didn't sign in, you get a name tag. You make sure you do that before you go. At least the sign-in part. On the other end of the room, and welcome to everybody that's on with us virtually. So I'll begin. I'm the Vice President of Development in normal times, and right now I'm also the interim President and CEO of the Community Foundation as we do a search for a new CEO. Our CEO of 15 years ended his time with us in June. He's now the CEO of the Greater Worcester Community Foundation in Worcester, Mass. So I'm always happy to be able to have this discussion. I think it's one of the most important topics for nonprofits in our community, and I'm really, really happy to have my friend Christine Detter be a co-presenter with me today, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Sure. Strange, I'm not even sitting down, so I'm Tom.
Oh my goodness, I get a microphone too. Well, and where's the camera for all the Zoom people? It's
right there on the wall.
Right there on the wall. Oh, okay. Oh, we're running a high-tech act over here these days. That's great. Well, thank you everybody for having me. Tom and I have actually done this presentation before, I think at least twice in various settings. Once it was all just humans pre-COVID. We all remember that, right? Once was in a small conference room and it was all remote, I think, but
just you and me.
it was right. It was just us making jokes with ourselves. And so that was fun. And I'm glad to see so many people in person and hopefully on Zoom. Danielle, you'll be our monitor. You'll keep us online there. Anyhow, I'm a lawyer, so I'm a partner at a law firm in Syracuse here, Bousquet Holstein, and I've been practicing since 27 years maybe at this point. Can you believe that one? I do practice in the world of trusted estates, charitable planning. I represent not-for-profit organizations of all kinds. So people who come with an idea and want to create a not-for-profit, and you say, are you so sure? There's lots of organizations in our community. Donors with tax issues who want to give away money. Boards of directors who are getting themselves all into all kinds of trouble. And then boards of directors who are interested but don't quite know how to launch something that we're going to talk about today, plan giving program. So I'm happy to be here. Always thrilled to be here with my partner in crime, Tom Griffith, and I think we'll have some fun.
You can hold on to it. I'll try to be loud.
Wow, so excited.
So I'm gonna take the jacket off just for
It's getting serious now.
ease of movement. So let me just toggle over here. So just a baseline set for everybody what a community foundation is and basically why are we here to do this program. And so community foundations aren't unique to Central New York. There's community foundations nationwide. Some states have one community foundation. Some states like New York have dozens. So when you think about it, it's basically a place-based public charity that allows people who care about a local community to donate assets so that they can create funds that do what they want to do. And when you aggregate all those together, you get a lot of really great resources that provide a lot of support for local nonprofits. So it's a collection of permanent charitable funds with donor-defined purpose, as it's put up there. Danielle, who leads this program of nonprofit essentials workshops, she leads our grant making work, our community grant making work. So, the kind of work that we do as development people to bring resources into our nonprofits is, what allows those to continue. And it's the same at the Community Foundation. The dollars that our donors give, are intended to support local nonprofits through our responsive grant making and initiative work and other programs. So I wanted to highlight the fact that planned giving is really connected to legacy. It is a concept in people's hearts that really is transformational in some cases when a person is able to think about what was important to them during their lifetime and put together a gift that's going to be maybe the greatest gift they've ever given because they don't rely on their assets anymore. That is an opportunity for real transformation for someone and can make a huge difference in their lives. And so community foundations are a place for that. I mean, that's our main focus. We have lifetime giving, but also legacy giving. And legacy giving is where those permanent charitable endowments typically come from. Do you want anything?
Just like these little
By the way,
interesting.
Christine was the board chair.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to say all that
15 years
part.
ago.
Yeah, so I was the board chair on the board of the Community Foundation. At the time that this building was being built, I was the chair for a couple of years, and I think I was on the board for 6. Tom and I actually together launched the professional advisors group of attorneys, accountants, life insurance professionals, certified financial planners that has really been quite successful over the last 15 or 20 years. And I remember all kinds of choices about every room in this place. So I have lots of little factoids about the Community Foundation from my time here and just watching the community foundations in the communities. I always wanted to know, and I always wanted to, so what goes on in the Albany Community Foundation, or what goes on in the Utica one, or what goes on in Buffalo, what goes on in Rochester, and it's like in every major city, right, across every state. Our former president CEO is in Worcester, and there's one in Springfield and in Boston, and of various sizes and shapes. And the little factoid that I like to tell you guys is because ages ago, 100+ years ago, it was the local banks who had an obligation to give back into the community. So it was probably here, Syracuse Savings Bank and the founders there. And what they decided, the bankers, is at a certain point is they're like, well, they're not really, I mean, they think they're out there selling in the community, but they really wanted to have a group of people, stakeholders in the community who are making decisions about where this money went. And so that's where you found all kinds of community leaders. And the reason why community foundations are different in each and every city, at least, for example, upstate, is because of the growth and the stories of the donors that come to the foundation and major wealth and major manufacturing. And so in many ways, our community foundation is reflective of our leadership and our community. And in one way, we certainly, one of the things that makes ours a little different is we have tremendous flexibility because we have a very high percentage of unrestricted funds. Now, that's not necessarily planned giving, but it can be. So all community foundations are the same, sort of, but they all are different because of their sort of place of origin, how their community has driven them forward, and then where the leadership is now. So that's my fact.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, just keep it.
So I just also wanted to point out that there's lots of other resources besides the Community Foundation, and I listed some of those there. You're going to get a copy of these slides after the event, so I just put them there so you could just to call back to. And so it's a little hard to read because of the placement of this black bar here, but let's says it's more blessed to give than to pay taxes. So
Even back then.
even back then. And so the point I really wanted to focus on with this is that there's really three places your dollars can go when you pass away. And that is, they can go to your heirs, they can go to taxes, or they can go to charity. So that's really it. And so a lot of what plan giving focuses on is the shifting of the tax dollars to one of those other two buckets, and especially the charitable bucket. And so with that, I just wanted to also note that, you know, this is the Harvard Manual for Tax Aspects of Charitable Giving. And so we're going to cover chapters 1 through 4 today.
Yeah. It's like the Bible for some people.
It is. It's a very useful book for certain things, but it's also not at all what we're going to talk about today. And the thing is like what we're going to talk about today shouldn't take you down the rabbit hole of tax aspects of charitable giving. But I just wanted to make sure you were aware that there is this rabbit hole, and there is times where you need to be like, oh, wait a minute, they should definitely be talking to their professional advisor, because that could be something that's complex. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Christine.
Well, I think we talk about it a little later, but the reason we don't want to focus today on tax planning and all the specifics in that very, very scary book is because it is scary, and you will be supported and your donors will be supported by their lawyer, their CPA, you know, community foundation, and the lawyers, probably the CPA, have all kinds of programs at our as a resource to us that we can calculate all kinds of things, like what's a life expectancy going to be and how much is supposed to, it will eventually, we think, go to charity based on the actuarial values. So just today we wanted to focus about the conversations and purpose and kind of how to get started, and not be scared by the tax stuff, because you'll have plenty of bench strength with folks who really are total nerds in that, like me and Tom.
All right, so let's start out by, oops, if I can get the slides. Yeah.
Slides it.
Good.
If you go in the bottom corner, there's arrows that might be able to get you back.
There we go. All right, so let's start out by answering the first question. So in the room, we'll just do a raise your hand and say something. On the online participants, just put something in the chat. So what are you hoping to learn today? Anyone have anything that they want to learn today?
How to ask.
Yeah. Thanks, Beth.
Sure. I guess, you know, if someone's already kind of made the comment of that they're going to be in your will, or that you're gonna leave your organization in your will, but you haven't had conversations with them for several years, and you're new to the organization and don't have a relationship with them. And it's kind of bringing that up to them again, and kind of how to continue that relationship and move them into the next direction of what are the next steps. They haven't really given you the information, and you want to keep going in that direction, but you don't want to keep bothering.
We have a few online here, Tom.
Okay.
The step-by-step process, I know it's asking a lot, but an overview. Prospecting strategies. Whether this is something that the individual's organization should be pursuing. Charitable gift annuities, and that's what we have so far.
I think one of the questions I have is, when it does become complex, who can we ask questions to? Is that like you guys, if we're getting a planned gift and it does become something you need to go to that Bible for, you know, who do you go to when you don't understand?
I think, I'm asking this that right now, If there's a planned gift, that means that your donor has pretty much talked with their own lawyer, maybe their tax accountant, and either drafted something or they're thinking about drafting something. So the client and the lawyer should be able to explain it to you in language that makes very clear sense. So part of planned giving, it's not really just like donors and their fancy professional advisors out there coming up with all kinds of great ways to give their money away. It really is a dialogue if it's done right. You know, the first thing, how to ask, it's the dialogue, it's the relationship you build. It's the, if we do this, is this something that your organization is willing and capable of fulfilling? Because the worst thing that happens is, maybe it's not the worst thing. There are ways to kind of deviate it, but that one day you open the mail at your not-for-profit organization and all of a sudden you're getting like legal papers from the local survey court that says, hey, you're the beneficiary of $50,000 for this like weird thing that you don't even do. So then you have to figure out, how do you deviate that? What are the permissible ways to kind of fix that? So the conversation before planned giving happens really everybody should understand. It shouldn't necessarily be something that you don't understand, but you can always go back to your donor and their advisor to say, can you explain this to me different way, better way? You can reach out to your board, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to the community foundation. I mean, I'm sort of like roving ambassador for the community foundation. I am a lawyer in private practice. You can call me if you want. But no substitute for a conversation. Don't be afraid to ask this question.
Question. If someone does make a pledge, what, is there some sort of documentation or record that we need to then?
Well, we're gonna talk about that, absolutely, that's part of the step-by-step
Yes,
process.
yes, is the
Um,
short answer.
Yeah, our plan gifts allocated and whether you budget for those, strategies for starting a conversation. So yeah, we absolutely will have stuff there. So as we go through, I'm just gonna mark these off. I really love Aaron's question or comment in the chat as to whether or not this is even something that they should be working on as a nonprofit. So hopefully we'll answer that one too. And yes,
So I'm also wondering, we have a few people who have, given planned gifts or said that they have actually through the community foundation, I think. Some, I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, I'm looking also for ways to honor and recognize and build on that, so that without, I don't know, it's like a tender subject, like bragging, but not bragging.
right,
know,
storytelling,
or-
we'll call it storytelling.
Yeah, or just some sort of like a gift of some type, or, that's what I'm trying to figure out too.
Call it sharing and acknowledging. All right, great. Well, these are all thankfully topics that we're gonna hit on today, so that's awesome. And glad to get that out there. So got a couple of poll questions that if you can run the poll, Corey, that would be great. And for the people that are in the room, if you just want to answer those to yourselves, and then we can see how you compare to the 32 answers online. That's what it looks like. Looks like we're getting a pretty strong 1 to 5 or 0 planned gifts in a year. And then a good portion are asking for planned gifts. or planning to ask for plan gifts. So 73% are in that bucket. Looks like it's stabilized out there, so awesome. Right. So did that resonate with people in the room? Is that pretty much what people are at as well? Okay. All right, so what is planned giving? So, I mean, really, almost any gift takes some planning. You have to actually think about it and then do it. This is just one where it's a more significant component is in the future. And so, I always like to think about it as it's typically in the financial or estate plan. It's something that's a beneficiary designation, a bequest, something that's in some other sort of structure besides just a regular gift. There's a lot of complexity to that. There's lots of different types of plan gifts. But for the purposes today, we're really going to focus on the financial and estate plan part. The beneficiary designation and bequests. It absolutely is much more collaborative, more collaborative than someone deciding they're going to write a check to your organization, or even if they're going to transfer a stock to your organization or something like that. But as I mentioned before, it probably is the most substantial way that a donor is going to be able to support your organization. So.
I might add, like, the easiest way to differentiate plan giving is it's not like your annual appeal, right? It's not your annual giving letter. It's not your end of year letter. Those monies you're asking for, maybe those monies are part of your budget. Those monies are things that your organization wants to do and is looking to generate additional gifts in order to be able to accomplish. Plan giving, really, you may not get anything now. It's typically for the future. These gifts are typically larger. They typically come as a beneficiary designation, as a clause in a will, as a clause in a trust, as a payment on a life insurance policy when somebody passes away. And the other thing about plan giving is it's not usually all your idea at the organization. A lot of plan giving is kind of what the donor's idea is for it. And when you can live with it, and when the organization is a match, and when it's also something that the organization wants to accomplish, you gotta win. That's why, even though you may not see $1 for 5 to 10 years or more, but you never know, that conversation is very important.
Yeah, and ultimately, we typically don't even ask the dollar amount when somebody is planning to leave a gift of some kind to the community foundation. Because, arguably, whatever they say is likely to be wrong, is, they don't know really how much money they're going to have when they pass away. They don't know if anything is going to be left in that IRA. I mean, it's a little different with life insurance gifts and things like that, but, in a lot of ways, the life insurance could get liquidated, prior to them passing away if they need it for long-term care or some other thing like that. So, and that's another kind of thing that I'll point out later, but we never do anything that's irrevocable. Everything that we do in this space is just all changeable as long as the donor's alive. So to the point that Christine just made, I mean, you don't know when, you don't know how much, this is why, an endowment fund is actually a really perfect companion to plan giving, right? It gives your organization a place to put part or all of any planned gifts that come in. That's actually like a really good kind of just practice is for your organization. Say you receive a planned gift, you might get back to the office today and have a letter from an attorney saying, or notice of probate saying that your organization, is getting something. The practice should be that you bring that to your organization and you think about it, as a rule, like how much is this gonna be set aside for the future and how much of this is gonna be for, you know, current needs, assuming that the gift is flexible in that way. But ultimately, when you put more aside for an endowment fund, it promotes that sustainability of your organization. It makes it so that you have this spendable amount. And, you know, unless it's like directed that way by the donor, if your board decides to do that, that's a quasi endowment. You're not actually making it, you know, required to be an endowment. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. You know?
When a board, sort of board designates endowment. Just that as a useful tool, you know, one of the things I focus on that you guys should focus on, is they call it donative intent, right? So it's what are the wishes of your donor, right? You know, it's like customers are always right, my clients are always right. Well, guess what? Your donors are always right. So what is their intention? And if they don't use the word endowment, which means, aha, we're going to make this permanent, we're going to invest it, at least in the community foundation, we have a managed investment pool. We keep track of how many, the word is component fund, but how many component funds does this community foundation have now? About 1,000?
About 900, yeah.
About 900. So some of them are donor advised funds, some of them are endowment funds, some of them are agency funds, all different kinds of gift restrictions, right? An endowment fund, if you get something that says this is to be an endowment fund, now that means you've got to invest it basically in perpetuity. And there's some rules about being able to draw down the interest. But if you don't see the word endowment and you get your organization gets $250,000 and you think, wow, I think we really should put some of this away for a rainy day. That's where Tom passed it over to me, where the board can deem part of that. Maybe they want to put $150,000 and they almost the board self-restricts it. So it's board restricted endowment. Easier to undo than donor restricted endowment. Although when your donor's alive and something comes in, a lot of times your donors have passed, and that's why the conversation is so important about the restrictions. But you can get the rules about how to get a release of a restriction on endowment fund if you have a living donor. But just as important as recognizing that, oh, this is an endowment fund, I have to do something different. I can't just put it in the operations account and spend it. You can also, if you receive it, decide that it's in the best interest of your organization to put away X dollars, and then that's board restricted endowment, which is a lot easier to undo.
So the last bullet there, it just talks about some donors may actually prefer to give through the community foundation for their legacy. And, you know, one of the attendees noted that might be the case for some of the gifts that they're going to, planned gifts that they're going to receive. Reason for that is it just, you know, can be a hedge against any uncertainty that they have about the organization itself. Or maybe they have like 5 different organizations they want to support. So one engagement at the community foundation can create a fund that supports all 5 of those in perpetuity. You know, that's a lot easier for them than it is to have to go and have conversations with all 5 of their favorite nonprofits, who all are going to want to do it maybe a little different. And so, so it's just in some cases provides that ease for the donor. All right. So we already.
Tom, what do you do when a donor comes and, you know, says, oh, you know, I want to make sure that Interfaith Works gets something, but I want to hedge against uncertainty. But how do you handle the conversation? Would you call me and we would help the donor, you know, with what their concerns are, or, you know, since we do have our endowment here?
Yeah, like what you'll actually see is if as we go through this, that it's all about the donor, right? So if the donor wants me to engage the nonprofit, in this case, Interfaith Works, absolutely, I'll go do that. You know, if, you know, they just, you know, want to make their plan, to point their asset that they're giving to the agency fund, great. If they want to let let you know that, then that's great too. Or if they want to create their own separate fund that is designated and not part of the agency fund, because we're going to talk about that in a second, how different those two things are. And so, so yeah, that's absolutely, it's really all dependent on the donor. We already talked about this part, you know, that planned giving and endowments go hand in hand. So sometimes, you know, you experience some of these things, you know, and you think, wow, wouldn't it be great to have an endowment? You know, and so, you know, that is absolutely something that we see with a lot of nonprofits, and you know, working to build an endowment over time can help you with these, help you overcome some of these obstacles to sustainability.
I would say there's lots of obstacles, right? But building a planned giving program, it's the long game. It's running the marathon. And if you don't start now, if you don't start the training now, you're not going to be able to run that marathon. And 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, I mean, it's never too late to start, right? It's never too late to put on your running sneaks and start running and training for that 5K. But it really is the long game. And you always have to have that planned giving card sort of in your pocket, because if you're getting pushback from a donor on some kind of annual giving or something that's asking for a current gift, you just always have to think. And in many ways, it is a lot less sort of cash flow painful, right? For a planned gift, naming percentage of a IRA as a charitable beneficiary, or life insurance, or, you know, nothing's ever gonna happen to me, but I'm gonna put this organization in for 5% under my will, now that my kids are out of college and on their way, and I'm in a different phase of life. So always, I guess, the drumbeat of planned giving should always be one of the cards that you play, because it's the long game and it is marathon.
Building up these other sources of revenue is key. The ones that are bolded there, help balance other pieces. Right now we have a unique place in history. We've got the greatest wealth transfer between generations, you know, coming to us. And so when you think about what these baby boomers are going to leave to the next generation, it's a lot. And so, so another problem that Central New York has is that many of those baby boomers might move to another state before they die, even though they lived here and they worked here, raised their children here, and have all their favorite nonprofits here.
Made all their money here.
Made all their money here, right? So that is part of why we created what's called the 5 for CNY campaign, and to highlight this particular issue, that there's going to be this large transfer of wealth, and if we can just get people in Central New York to remember the nonprofits that were important to them as part of their financial and estate plans, even just 5% of what's going to transfer between generations would be a huge impact. I mean, still 95% could go to the kids or taxes. But, you know, the 5% that remains here would leave over $1 billion to local nonprofits over the next 10 years. And when you think about that, I mean, we have just over $400 million in endowment here at the Community Foundation, and we've been in existence for 96 years. So another $1 billion coming into the community over the next decade would be a game changer. This is a part of our 5 for CNY infographics, talking about like what are the things that we're working on, what do we have to solve here in Central New York.
And this was something that the Community Foundation worked on maybe within the last 5 years. And all of this information and data is their links through the CNYCF website, right?
Yeah, so 5forcny.org has all of this on the backup data. There's more on our website. That's called cnyvitals.org. So there's on all of these issues, you can really dig into the details. This slide shows kind of what that wealth transfer looks like for an average family. You know, an average household in Central New York is about $80,000 that's going to transfer between generations. So it's 4,000 of that going to their favorite nonprofits. You know, obviously we need the $7.9 million estates also to leave their 5% to make all the math work out right. But it is, you know, we wanted to make this, you know, tangible for people and help them understand, you know, what are we really talking about? But yeah, $1.3 billion. It's an additional $74 million a year in support if that was endowed. Stop beating the 5forCNY drum, but that is absolutely
Good job,
a
Tom.
website you should go to, and there's resources there for any nonprofit to deploy that conversation with your own constituents and just talk about it in terms of just, you don't even have to involve the community foundation as all. You can just talk about it in terms of your nonprofit encouraging your constituents to leave money to your organization as part of your financial or estate plans. We have a nonprofit toolkit that's available if you want that. You can just request it. So we're missing chats. Oh, here we go. We got a link. Awesome. So it was encouraging to see in the poll that, you know, many of you are asking or planning to ask for planned gifts. It was encouraging to see that some of you were getting them. A robust planned giving program that accepts complex gifts and has a legacy society. So that's part of that discussion around how do you acknowledge or recognize somebody that says that they're planning to give a gift to you. So we're going to talk about those things, and I think all of those are relatively straightforward, you know, in how you can address those. And I don't know if you want to talk about the millionaire next door phenomenon that we have here in Central New York with, you know, I'm sure you see it with your clients all the time that walk in and, you know, don't necessarily look like a millionaire, but you know, really are. So.
Isn't there a book? There's a book like 20 years ago, The Millionaire Next Door. And it was, I don't know if they were thinking of people in Syracuse, but really you've seen the millionaires next door. If you've watched the press and you follow sort of philanthropy, it's the dry cleaner owners who leave, you know, $25 million to local college. It's the Oswego professor who too also had family money, but you know, he was a college professor, starts his own foundation. So I guess I would say you really, really just never know. And sometimes I have found that in working with donors and working with folks of means and wealth, and they all have all the tax advisors and the investment advisors and lawyers. Sometimes they're the hardest to crack. They're the hardest nut to crack, and they get nervous and they want to make their money work for them, and they do crazy things like give to Florida community foundations instead of our community foundation because they think, well, I'm a Florida resident. I have to stay out of the state of New York at least 186 days to be a Florida resident. There's no Florida estate tax. There's no Florida income tax. I have to be in Florida. So now I have to give in Florida. And as a New York lawyer and as a New York not-for-profit lawyer, I'm like, do they know, and all their smarty pants lawyers and accountants and investment people, do they know that like specifically New York State Tax Department has said where you give your charitable dollars is not an indicia of your residency? You know, your driver's license, your primary home, where you vote, if you go to church, all of that stuff is, but not where you give charitably. So I don't know, lots of millionaires next door, keep them coming.
Exactly. All right, so we talked a little bit about this already: bequests, beneficiary designations, life insurance, charitable trusts, charitable gift annuities, pooled income funds, real estate, bargain sales. There's all kinds of different, there's chapters on every single one of these in the manual, so dig into that whenever we want. But really the most straightforward and the very, I mean, like more than the 80-20 rule here applies, you know, far more than 80% of the kinds of gifts that you're gonna see are bequests, beneficiary designations, and life insurance. Okay.
And I mean, this is the toolbox right here. So part of starting a plan giving program, even in today's environment, is usually not-for-profit organizations kind of put together like a little brochure, little collateral, a little trifold, little something you can hand to donors that says, you know, plan giving, interfaith works, plan giving, for whatever your organization is, some kind of piece of paper that we have a folder. It keeps getting more and more beautiful, a folder with all kinds of interesting information about ways to give. So putting together that collateral is very important, but for you guys to know, because we're telling you that this needs to be a card that you play, the card that you have in your pocket with donor conversations, you know, this is it. And some of it is as simple as it comes. A bequest is either in a will or a trust. It means your donor's lawyer has written it and talked about it. It's either a percentage or a dollar amount. It may or may not tell you guys what to do with it, meaning I want it to be used for early education or scholarships for inner city kids or those kinds of things. Beneficiary designation. So, you know, life insurance, 401k, IRAs, those kinds of financial instruments are the ones that have beneficiary designations. You know, 2% or a flat dollar amount. It can either do it as a percentage of, you know, 100% being the whole. You can do a percentage or you can do a flat dollar amount. I always like percentages because it rides the wave of market value increases and spending decreases. Life insurance, easy. Charitable trust. Now that's like, now you're starting to get a little more complicated. That is a real trust that your donor creates now, and they retain either for somebody's life or 2 lives or a term of 10, 20 years, usually an income interest, and you guys get it at the end. So at least you know what's in there and what you're going to get. But they get a charitable deduction for, this is a nice nerdy sentence, but the present value of the remainder interest. What that means is based on all these projections, how much is going to go to my charity at the end of the day, right? Somebody asked about charitable gift annuities. So that you can actually have your own program if you are a not-for-profit and you've been in existence at least 10 years and you want to register with the New York State Insurance Department, and you go in, register, and you have to maintain charitable reserves, and it's a mind-bending set of actuarial calculations, and you basically become your own insurance department. Nobody, including Syracuse University, does that. You work with a vendor, right, to provide a charitable gift annuity. That is kind of like an easier charitable remainder trust because your donor gets the income interest. And at the end of the life or the end of the term of years, then it goes to charity.
I'll just add in there too.
Who's our vendor? Do we?
Yeah, so for charitable gift annuities, we are actually licensed and can do them and have done them. We stopped doing them a few years ago because the National Gift Annuity Foundation became licensed in New York. And so we now, whenever a donor is interested in a gift annuity, just simply connect with the National Gift Annuity Foundation. And the donor still feels like they're doing it through us, you know, but the National Gift Annuity Foundation is really doing, you know, the actual transaction. And so, So that same thing would be a very easy solution for any of you as nonprofit, development people to engage with. And I can, if you want an introduction to the National Gift and Annuity Foundation, I'm glad to arrange that too with the people that we know there, so.
That's good. So even Syracuse University goes through like State Street Bank. And they advertise it pretty heavily, like for major philanthropic institutions like an SU, with an army of development advancement professionals. That is one of the things that they find is like the easiest to just market to get people into the plan giving space. I've never done a pooled income fund.
We
I've
have
ne-
one here, but-
I've never done a bargain sale. Gifts of real estate. Be very careful about what kinds of real estate you accept. How fast it can be sold, who's gonna pay for the insurance, who's gonna pay for the property taxes while you've got this lovely piece of property. Your board should be involved in gifts of real estate.
And Beth was just talking about, had a question and there's a specific donor that just gifted a condo for through the community foundation, and it's going to be mostly for the benefit of Interfaith Works. So definitely something that we're glad to interact with on. We did have an inquiry recently also about a gift of a trailer park, which is specifically excluded in our gift acceptance policy. So and the reason why certain things are excluded or included in a gift acceptance policy is because it's the relative level of risk that your organization feels comfortable taking. So what we did in that case is the same entity that runs the National Gift Annuity Foundation. It's called N.E.W.S, and they have the ability to handle that type of gift. So we actually connected the donor with the trailer park, which is actually a very worth millions. And so we connected them with N.E.W.S, and they'll be able to set up, make that gift happen. So, so yeah, absolutely layers of resource beyond, what is just existing in your own organization or local community. So
Tom, on the real estate, so oftentimes right now, because the agency's been around a while, we have a lot of donors who are quite elderly. And, they're like, oh, I don't know and they've had to move to the Nottingham. The house is still sitting empty. Kids don't live here. I mean, do we just go in and say, look, why don't we take care of this for you? Or what do you recommend in those kinds of situations?
yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that conversation, but it's really, understanding, engaging them about if that is something that is on their mind, and suggesting to them that, if that is something that they'd like to move into their charitable plan, there are options for that are beneficial from a tax perspective this year and make things easier for when you get to, the point of probate or, estate administration. So, so yeah, it isn't all about them conversation, if it's not bothering them, they have it, they like to, I don't know, go swim in their pool,
I don't know, Beth, like when people move to the Nottingham, it's such a precarious time in their life because they know chances are they're not moving back to the 4-bedroom house in name your suburb. So sometimes like, I was gonna say like logic, rational reason, emotions sort of drive, and then they like slow roll the sale of the house because the meaning or something needs to be repaired and they don't really know how to do it. I bet you their children are probably trying to push them, but there's something about the family home, especially when it's vacated and the kids aren't here anymore, where it becomes kind of an emotional issue.
An anchor for
Yeah, kind of. And it's weird. People, might just be content to like know it's there for a while. But to Tom's point, any way that your organization can be of assistance, instantly my brain goes right to what are the property taxes? How much does insurance cost? How much is the plowing? What if in winter it's vacant? Or we're going to tell the insurance company that it's actually vacant. So if there's a pipe that burst, like all the legal stuff about And mostly I would say, unless it's a quick sale condo, which I hope this one was, it's not really, you're not really in the business of it. Um, and it can distract from the mission of your organization, and it is a lot of work, because then you have to tell the donor, well, you need to also give me $40,000 to maintain the property for the year, or at least through the winter. So then they're like, oh, I have to pay the Nottingham. You want me to give you your house? So it starts to get really touchy. Vacation homes, however, might be a little less touchy, unless it was came down from the family, or like hot commodity properties. But that family home with your donors who are downsizing and thinking about the next act gets a little touchy. And it's a hairy thing to get into, especially if it hasn't sold already, right?
This is actually a perfect segue into this next slide. So we talked about asset-based gifts, like these are things that people have that when they die, they don't need anymore. But when you think about what are they seeking to address? You know, that whole, you know, simplifying things, their house, you know, as a great example of the other life, family, asset goals. You know, sometimes they're trying to get a tax deduction in a particular year, like doing a gift, you know, a planned gift gets them that deduction now, even though the gift might not happen for a long time, but that can be really beneficial in a certain year as they are heading into retirement or selling their business or receiving deferred compensation, or, you know, all those kinds of larger taxable events that occur as you head into those years. Then if they want an income stream, sometimes they want something that they can just rely on in that regard. You know, and Christine already mentioned the gift annuity and the charitable remainder trust are ways to get that. Sometimes it's about a particular big asset that they want to transfer, and that's a charitable deed trust is a great example of how you can do that, where you're paying charity over a period of time while they're alive, and then the asset transfers to their heirs, without gift tax. So absolutely a more complex situation.
Way complex charitable lead trust. And you have to be in a pretty low interest rate environment, by the way, for that one to be a winner. It's real complicated.
Which, by the way, we are still in, even though
Yeah,
most
for
people think we're
gifting,
not.
for the IRS rates for
Right.
gifting.
But it's not the 80s or, when I got like whatever 12 or 13% on my savings account, I thought, didn't realize my parents were paying
Such a good Boy
50% on
Scout.
their mortgage. So.
Yeah, but just charitable deed trust, just as an example, Jackie Onassis, when she passed away, structured her entire estate in charitable deed trust, because all of her kids, certainly her children, grandchildren, they had enough money for the next 20 years without her inheritance. So usually charitable deed trust ends after the period of paying the charities for 20 years, let's say. And then the principal goes to the beneficiaries. So it would be her grandchildren's kids. And so that's some complicated planning.
So, I don't know what happened there. What's happening? So here's an example of a tax situation. Pretty basic one. Someone has an IRA with $100,000 in it, and then they have $100,000 in their bank account, and they pass away. If they want to support an heir and a charity, and they want each to get half, there's only really one way to do that for it to be successful. So if they gift the IRA to charity, and the charity is tax exempt, the charity gets that whole $100,000 IRA. If instead they gift the IRA to their heir is not tax exempt. They're going to pay income tax on that $100,000. So it'll leave them with about $65,000, depending on what their income tax bracket is. So this is just a really basic example of where, choosing the right asset can make a difference when you're planning. And so,
Yeah, I mean, I know it does the box and all the whole stuff, feels a little like an SAT question, right? But all we want you to guys to see through this is IRA gifts to charity is a winner because the charitable organization doesn't pay any tax. I don't know if we put it in this presentation, but there's also something that's in the law right now. It's called a QCD. Everybody's got an acronym. Qualified Charitable Distribution. And so when people get, when your donors, when our clients get to need to take minimum distributions, which used to be when they were 70 and a half or the year after they were 70 and a half, now the laws have changed so that it could be 73, and I think it even stretches out to 75 if you're a certain age when legislation
And
passes.
nobody has to take one this year.
Yeah,
That just got decided last week.
so such exciting tax law stuff. It's not even in that book, Tom. It's so exciting. So, but a QCD, so sometimes people have such large IRAs that they have to take the minimum distribution. That money has to come out. Okay, well, sometimes they live on Social Security or live modestly or have other income generating assets. They don't really want to have to take the money out, or they don't really need the whatever the $60,000 to live. So now in the law, if you guys know that and you hear any kind of, well, complaining about required minimum distributions or retirement assets, know that your organization could be a direct charitable beneficiary. The max is 100 grand, still pretty good, right? That the broker, say it's a Morgan Stanley account, can make a direct distribution from your donor to you guys as a charitable organization. And it used to be, as you would imagine, that the donor had to take the money out. And then they had to pay income tax on it. And then they could take their charitable deduction. Well, that seems to be like a lot of steps, and I don't know if the most money goes to charity or the most money goes to the government. Here, the donor gets credit for having taken their minimum distribution, and your organization gets the money. QCD. It's a great new development in the toolbox.
Absolutely. And one that anybody with an IRA has when they reach age 70 and a half. So this is just sort of a basic example about endowment fund. You know, there's two graphs here. The orange is the fund balance. And it's a little erratic because it's invested in the market. It needs to be so it can grow and keep pace with inflation and provide some spendable amount for your nonprofit each year. But what is not erratic is that cumulative spending. That's a nice straight line. And the reason for that is that most of the people, when you're using an endowment, is you're not basing it off of a particular value at an end of a year. You're basing it on like maybe a 2 or a 3 year. Community Foundation's case, we use a 5-year rolling average of our endowment funds. And that's what we spend based off of, is that 5-year, 20-quarter rolling average. And so that's what smooths that out and makes it so that it is effectively an ever increasing steady amount that's added to your budget. You know, if you're doing the endowment management correctly. Yeah, there's some heartburn when you're watching those ups and downs that happen in the market, but you know, that's just part of the deal. So I'll spend a second here. I mentioned these two things earlier. So there's two key funds that work directly with nonprofits. One is a designated fund. So that's when a donor creates a fund for an organization. And every year, a spendable amount goes to the organization. So it's endowed, it should be ever increasing. And that spendable amount is just a thing that happens. And here at the Community Foundation, that thing happens in May. Every May, we send out the checks from all the designated funds. You get that amount. An agency fund is when an organization creates a fund for themselves, which donors can also give to. It's different than a designated fund because instead of just getting the income or the spendable amount from it, it remains an asset on your books from an accounting perspective. It's your dollars. It's been gifted legally to the community foundation, and we're now the fiduciary for it because of that legal ownership. But it is not our asset. It's an asset with an offsetting liability on our books. It shows up as a zero. So it actually stays on your books, shows up a little differently in your financial statements, but the other piece is it's more flexible than a designated fund. Instead of, like, you can just take the agency fund, will also tell you what the spendable amount is each year, and you can like take that if you want it. Or you can take any other amount if you want, or you can take nothing. So up to 100% of the fund is accessible as long as it's going to go back to the charitable purpose that your organization has. So in other words, if you're thinking about dissolving or someone's suing you for tripping and falling on your, property, and we're concerned that money from the endowment might go to a creditor, that would be a case where we would probably say no to a request for a distribution, which is actually, I think, a good thing, from an organization's perspective. It adds an extra layer of protection against, against these dollars not being used for charitable purpose.
Okay, so if we currently don't have an endowment fund established, we could have the community foundation create one for us, or we need a lead donor to start one for us.
So are you talking about the agency example or the designated?
So the way I'm reading that is that the designated fund exists within the community foundation, right? And then
So it's when a donor, so you could, right now, if you had a donor come and say, I'd really like to make an endowment gift to you as part of my estate. And you could say, that's great. Please go see the community foundation and they can set that up for you. And what we would do is we would help them set up through their estate gift, a designated fund for your organization.
Okay, but
So
then
that-
what if another donor comes along and wants to contribute to it? Is it to that same fund? Or is it-
No, they can actually, what we would do with that donor is create a separate one that is in their name, still benefiting your organization. So the important piece of funds here at the Community Foundation is that helps people be remembered. So almost all the funds that we have a name associated with them. Sometimes it's not intuitive, it's like the Benji Fund or, so there's things that mean something to the donor and not to the world, but, in most cases, it's actually the people's names or the family name that gets remembered. And that's what we love to do, is to be able to honor those legacies, honor those people's impact on our community, regardless of what their fund is going to do. So if you had different donors that each wanted to do an endowed gift, we would likely just, have them do their own. Now, the second donor could go and give to the first designated fund. There's nothing that says that they can't. It's just not our preferred way of doing it. Now, the other thing is that, they could actually say, we want to send dollars, to you, but we want you to create an agency fund with that. And agency funds start at $10,000, so any organization can do that with $10,000 or more. And then, you can actually do that.
Well,
Yeah.
right, so Ally, I guess what I was thinking that you were asking about is your organization has accumulated $3 million by magical happenstance. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do with this? How do I invest it appropriately? Who do I give it to? Do I give it to like a financial advisor on the board or on somebody I know or my financial advisor? What do I do? How do I, as a small organization, invest these endowed funds, right?
Yeah.
That's where the community foundation can be your partner, and your organization is creating your own fund, like the name,
Your organization's name
agency,
is-
there's a contract, actually, it's a few page agreement that sets forth what's going on and who's given what and who's gonna do what and what the community foundation is going to do. And that is almost, that's what, the way I view it, is it's a community foundation being of service to the not-for-profit organizations, typically smaller, but sometimes large ones in our community, and to help them manage and invest these big bucks in endowment funds.
And it's not even big bucks. I mean, like I remember,
My
the
example was
Kingsbury-
big bucks.
yeah, no, I like the 3 million. But King Prairie Food Pantry, received a gift. They're out in, Cuyahoga County, and they received a gift. It was, I think, only around $50,000 or $60,000 that just came out of nowhere. And it really freaked them out because it was like way more than their budget for the year. And, you know,
I put in stocks, mutual funds,
Yeah,
what do
they
I
had
do?
no idea
What's
what
my
to do.
fiduciary?
so
Role
thankfully,
here.
one of the people that used to be on our Cuyahoga Fund Leadership Council out in Cuyahoga County was on the King Prairie Food Pantry board and said, oh, just go see the community foundation. And so we set up a fund for them. And since then, they've been doing this thing where when they have extra dollars, they move it into the community fund, their agency fund here at the community foundation. And also other people have been given to it as well. And they've actually, I think, received an additional estate gift too that went into it. Again, not a huge one. You know, actually, that's something I didn't mention yet, but most estate gifts, you know, that a nonprofit receives, the average nationally is somewhere around $35,000. So they're not all game-changing numbers, you know, but at the same time, like 35,000 is not a bad thing to get. So, I mean, so it's,
And this seems like a silly question, but can you do both? Sorry.
yeah, absolutely. Many organizations have designated funds, many organizations have agency funds, but the organization can't start a designated. The only kind of fund you can create is an agency. Yep. You can't restrict dollars for future boards, like, so you can never go like put it in an actual endowment here because, you know, that's like making a choice for one of your future boards that can't be undone, and that's not allowed. So, yep,
What's the minimum for the designated?
designated fund minimum is 25,000.
If you had an agency fund, you mentioned earlier about you write your checks in May, but you can get money out.
Anytime in the year. Yep, you can request up to 100% of the funds with just minutes from a board meeting or a board resolution. Yep.
The other thing is, you know, with whatever dollar amount, something that astute donors ask is, well, of your organization or of the community foundation, that community foundation regularly gets asked, well, how do you invest your money? Where do you put it? And so the idea is that the 900, I know Tom's got a canned answer for this, but I'll give you just my layperson's view. The 900 funds, the $400 million is professionally managed. They have a finance committee, they have an investment committee, and regularly, just like your boards, their board monitors the performance and meets with the investment advisor. And the investment advisor, the people who do this work, also their job is to invest monies of other foundations. So they're, I don't know, they may do investing for wealthy individuals, but mostly their deal is that they are investing endowments of all kinds of sizes, 200, 400, 800 billions of dollars. And so they advise the community foundation as to the investment strategy, the performance of certain funds. Yes, just like any other provider, there is a fee associated with that. But I gotta tell you, our investment performance has been pretty darn good. Is there a part where we talk about how we invest our money? Because here we're telling the folks, you can give us your endowment fund and designated funds. The next question is always, how you gonna invest it for us?
We don't have it in this.
Okay.
But it's absolutely something we can talk about if someone's interested in that. You can go as deep as you want. But the other thing I just put it, the way I frame that is that, you know, our investment consultants, that's their mission, is to help nonprofits or endowments like foundations like us, you know, achieve success with that work. Our mission is to create permanent endowed dollars for local nonprofits. That's what we focus on. It takes a lot of effort to do that work. I don't believe any of the nonprofits in this room have a mission to focus on endowment management other than we, right? So you have a mission. You should work on that, you know, if there's an opportunity, whether it's with us, you have, I mean, by the way, everything we're talking about, you don't have to do it with the community foundation. You can go do it with, you know, an independent, you know, investment advisory organization. There's other choices you can make with respect to that. I would highly encourage you to do that as opposed to like trying to create your own, you know, don't invent your own wheel.
On the previous slide, Tom, there was a sentence I didn't understand. Under agency funds, we have a phrase that says they typically can take the assets back. Does that mean the donor?
No, just, the donor is the agency. You know, so, I mean, the only place any dollars go when it leaves the agency fund is back to the agency. So this is the statement that basically you can request up to 100% of the assets management. Yeah, no problem. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, you know. But this really does also correlate to planned giving. It's important to have a plan. You know, what's the goal? Are we going to use any planned gifts? And so I'll just leave that for here and then move into this part, which is, you know, if to answer the question that came up about, is this even something my organization should do? You know, if you're in this room and you're not sure that that's the case, you know, and you're just exploring this and you take it back to your organization, you have a conversation with them, you know, you need to talk about like, you know, what would be the purpose of this? What would be the goal? You know, who's going to be responsible? You know, the one thing I like to say that planned giving isn't competitive with your annual giving because it's different things, right? It's like an asset down the road versus a check today or something given today. And so, you know, they're not conflicting in that way. What they conflict in is your capacity as an organization. And the one thing that I would highly encourage you to keep in mind is that if you start looking at doing planned giving, you know, even if you are just going to do the very smallest thing, which might be just including a sentence in your newsletter that says, have you thought about including blank in your financial or estate plan? Even if it's something along and that's the only thing you do, but you have whatever you choose to do in this vein and whatever you then grow into doing in this vein, you need to keep doing it. It can't just be like periodic, you know, random plugs. You know, it's one of those things that like takes a long time to grow, and the seed planting has to continue with people for them to get it. Because that sentence isn't going to hit them in the right spot every time they read it. It's going to hit them in the right spot when they're like, oh gosh, yeah, I just scheduled an estate plan review with Christine. Oh gosh, I need to go do that. I should probably talk about like whether or not I want to leave something to, you know, my favorite organizations. Yep.
Another question, as our organizations do our annual appeals, Christine, you said that that's not, you know, that's not the purpose of the annual appeal, but is it inappropriate to also ask at that moment? You know, if you're hoping they're going to give you a cash gift, then at the end of the year, but is it also appropriate to say, have you thought about including this organization in your estate?
I wouldn't conflate the two. You know, if you have like a newsletter that's covering all the things, it's fine to put them both in. But if you're doing a communication that's about the annual, stick with the annual and have a follow-up communication with everybody after that saying thank you so much, and then by the way, you know, we'd be glad to help you, you know, consider how to include this in your, you know.
Yeah, because it's a different thing, Allie. It's really, the answer is really just a business decision, right? Because you really need those annual gift dollars for whatever specific purpose. If you give somebody else an out in that letter, well, then they're like, oh, well, why don't I take door number 2 and you won't see any of that money. So it almost it's a competing interest. And so it is better to just, you know what you want the annual gifts and the annual appeal. There's so much more discussion and nuance and lots more to talk about planned gifts, and so it deserves that time too.
Another thing when you are talking about this with your board is you kind of wanna, figure out, what kind of gifts do you even wanna consider accepting? Or what kind of gifts would you want to partner with the community foundation or another resource? You received a gift, how much are you gonna commit to the long term? It's really good to have that decision made up front to say, every planned gift we get, 50% is going into the endowment, and the other 50% we're gonna talk about what we're gonna do with it. It all might go into the endowment, but at least 50% is, or 25%, or whatever your board decides. But again, it's an important piece of the conversation. And then, once you have sort of this going and have this planned giving and endowment thing going, it should be a conversation when you get to the end of an annual campaign, and you get to the end of a capital campaign. What do you do with anything that's exceeding those things? How much is going to go into permanent versus how much is going to, gold plate the whatever,
And it's a very nice problem to have exceeded your expectations. But remember what we talked about the donor's always right, the donor's intent. When you are raising money for a specific purpose, for the new building, for the new program, technically your donors usually, and I mean, I've had to review pledge cards, to identify and try and figure out, is there a gift restriction on this, or can this be moved to operating? Just be very mindful that the smallest representation that you guys make to your donor about what you're going to use that money for, even if it's in a newsletter, is what you have to use it for. It's only, and so that's the good problem to have, right? Say you needed to raise $100,000 and you raise 140. Well, if you've told them you're going to use that 40,000, that's what they think they gave you the money for. So you actually, when your donors are alive, you have to kind of strategize, come up with a plan, and go back to whomever you think is most easily approachable to get them to deviate that gift restriction, because they said, you told them you were going to use it for that building, and guess what, you're not, but you have this other interesting project that you would like to launch. You have to always remember the representations you're making in writing to your donors when you are fundraising, what you're going to use that money for.
That's actually a key piece, and it should be thought out ahead of time, because you can actually put that in. You can put that any overage will go to,
right,
because that's, and if you have that built in up front, you don't need to go have that conversation after. So one thing I wanted to notice too is, like, when you have retirements or anniversaries, founding dates or memorials or other things that come up, there are an opportunity to sort of have an additional interaction with, outreach to your donors that are sort of extraordinary, right? They're not part of the normal budget and that type of thing. It's a great opportunity to take, things that, that opportunity to talk about planned giving, as well as, the purpose of, maybe getting some annual dollars, if you will, into the endowment. So it's just, I want to note that those shouldn't be, those moments shouldn't be forgotten on both sides of both lifetime and legacy giving. All right, so we're gonna get into more of the process parts. So marketing, don't start here. So that's like, just what I want to like put out there first. The most compelling way to share it, and to grow, via marketing any sort of planned giving work is by talking about people that have already done it. So there was a study done in England where they looked at the words that attorneys use with their clients, and it said, for if an attorney said to their clients, "Would you like to include a charity in your estate plan?" They got a response rate of about 23%. If they simply changed the words to say, "Many of my clients include charities in their estate plan. Is that something you'd like to do?" The response rate went up by about into the 40%. So, so that powerfulness of seeing others or knowing that others are doing this, is a real motivator for people. And that is, if you go to our website and look at, the legacy giving section, that's what you're gonna see is stories. That's what you see when we do an ad in a magazine. That's what you see when we talk about this, in presentations. We typically share stories of people who have done this. Again, start with the basics when you do this, and integrate it into things you already do. You don't need to create some new thing to talk about planned giving. So this is also something that got brought up in the beginning. It's super important to create a legacy society of some nature. You may call it something, that's related to your organization, but whatever you call it, or whatever you do with it, you also want it to be inclusive. You don't want it to be, I don't even, like it when they include tiers, because again, you don't know what the number is going to be. And by the way, that's just not important. So include everybody. You want to document their intention to say that, hey, I'm planning to do this, but you don't need to get documentation. You don't need a copy of the will or a copy of the beneficiary designation or a copy of the formal document. You want to just trust what they're telling you on, and you can actually see this, on our website as well. The Legacy Society form is just one page, just the front, and all it asks is, basically how they want to be listed, how they're planning to make the gift, and whether it's a qualified retirement plan or life insurance or bequest, and the name of their professional advisor, and then they sign it. And so that is, really important. And keep track of that. Follow up with them, touch base with them. If they are okay with it, list them someplace so that they can show up on your website. Again, that's not so much for them as it is for all the other people that see it, because that'll be motivating. Well, if he can do it, I can do it, and it's not bad to also do something special for them. Have a special event, have a special newsletter, feature them in some way.
Your donor can also be anonymous, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Anonymous. Lots of folks find that a better way to go at a certain point, and then maybe they change their mind, but right, that's fine too.
We have, I think, 80-something anonymous people in our legacy society.
I have a quick question. So to the point about anonymous, a lawyer about a year ago reached out and said that someone had put us in their will, they passed away, and that we'd be getting a gift, and they were dealing with the legal side of it, and they had different properties that they were trying to tie up, and one was overseas, and they were waiting for everything. And so then probably in the beginning of this year, they reached back out to me and said, hey, we're still trying to figure things out, and hang tight, and money will be coming. Well, we didn't even know the money was coming, so it was kind of like this morning, and it was a surprise. But they haven't reached out again, and so I'm sorry. Let's see, we're in September right now. It's probably May was when my last conversation was with them. And so part of me is like, okay, I just want to know, like, on, like, what are we doing? And I figured if they're not reaching out, obviously, I think they would stall it on their end because they want to close this up and be done. But like, what would you say is like the best time frame for me to reach back out? Cause I don't want to be annoying, but I also want, you know, this gift to come in.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Yeah, so that's actually one of the benefits of having donors do their gifts through the community foundation, either for a designated fund or for an agency fund. It's just because, you know, we have somewhere between 6 and 12, you know, gifts happening all the time from the states. And so, yeah, and some take a long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, some have complexities. You know, we have one where 23 family members are suing the estate because they don't think that the will was right. And so not something that we have to deal with, but it's something, you know, that, you know, the attorney for the estate has to deal with. And, you know, but again, it's just a delay and takes time. And, you know, and then you may get, somebody might leave their house to you in the will, and then the executor might be calling you and saying, well, you know, I have a all cash as is offer, you know, that would be really expedient. Do you want to take that, or do you want to list it? And then you have to ask that question of your, you know, in board, your leadership, your gift acceptance committee. I mean, like, those kinds of questions come up for us all the time. Like, we deal with those kinds of things a lot more. But to your point about how often to check back in, yeah, I think quarterly is fine. I think 6 months is probably the longest I would wait between check-ins with an estate attorney that reached out to you about an estate gift. You know, so I think the key is, and that actually answers another question that was up there too from earlier, was, you know, we call it being pleasantly persistent. And so the same thing with, you know, a donor who mentioned that they were leaving a gift to you, but then never followed up. Or, you know, you had meetings with them and sent things to them, and then, you know, they never followed up. It's absolutely that kind of periodicity, you know. However, the donor, I would say, you know, every 6 months, it would be a more normal cadence. But again, it's pleasantly persistent. And
Yeah, and Gina, to your particular question, if you pull out the file of what originally was sent to you, do you remember, was it a will? Was it a trust? Did you see, you know, the zoo?
It was a will.
And did it say the zoo's going to get 20,000, or did the zoo say the zoo was going to share, you know, an equal share with other charities?
It's the percentage.
Okay, percentage.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was
so,
about-
so first trick is make friends with the paralegal in the lawyer's office.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll say good, excellent. And being pleasantly persistent, you know, prior to the end of the year, you know, your organization, everybody's making a budget, you know, in October, November, a perfect time to inquire. What's happening inside of the estate, just from what you've said, number one is when there are foreign beneficiaries, meaning not in the United States of America, it's very difficult to find, to identify. Those people have to go to a U.S. consulate even to sign the papers. Transferring the money is very difficult internationally. That's a big pain in the neck. The other thing is, you have your organization and other charities are involved. So then what the estate attorney has to do is they have to prepare a document. It's called an accounting. So that sounds like math, tax return. It's not. It's a legal document, and it gets submitted to the court, and it tells the story of the estate. And you'll get a copy, and so will the other charities, and so will the other beneficiaries. It gets filed with the court. There's a time where the lawyer has to go back. It tells the story of the estate, right? Like, this is what came in. This is.
and not in a good way. Like,
Not in
like a
user,
kind of
right?
way.
Yeah,
It's like,
no, in a very bad, only lawyers, yeah, like,
Wait,
yeah,
just numbers.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
but
Tables.
what's gonna happen is your actual dollar amount is gonna be the result of the approval of the objection on that accounting. So more legal expense to chase down an international beneficiary. That's gonna decrease the percentage of the charities a little bit, right? Or if there's another tax year and you have to pay more income taxes because it's invested. So there's a lot of things. Just the two things you said, to me, make it a little more complicated. An easy estate could be 6 to 9 months. A typical estate could be 18 months to 2 years. Longer than 2 years means there's complicated stuff there. International beneficiaries, and somebody's a slowpoke maybe on preparing the accounting, but your new paralegal friend will be able to tell you where they are in the process. And they are not gonna forget about you, even if, you know, they have to get back to you with all this, so.
And then a cute little twin elephant picture.
Yeah, right, exactly. Wanna see the baby elephants? Can you bring the checkbook?
There's the potential to get a partial distribution sometimes too, like some estate that's
And that's what they said, that if something happens that the, overseas thing can't end, they would wrap something up on part of it and then do a partial, so. Okay, thank you so much.
our fiscal year ends on March 31st. Our calendar year end is what affects our spending for the following year. So if a fund got created in a particular year, I always check in in the last quarter of the calendar year, because I'm like, this will actually change what the nonprofits get from this fund, depending on if, you make any more distributions from the estate before 12/31. So there's reasons where you can, do a check-in that make it, also pleasant, so.
I know, Tom, it's 2:35. We're not gonna take a break. We'll just push through. If
Yeah.
everybody needs to get up or wants to get a snack, please we're gonna keep
The
going.
cookies are not gonna eat themselves. So.
But this next part of the presentation is kind of fun, I think.
So when you think about the people, right, like who in your organization are prospects for this kind of outreach, for this type of connection? And, it's basically the BFFs, right? Board members, former board members, longtime donors of all sizes, obviously the major donors, volunteers. Again, Millionaire Next Door, they may not have had money to give you, but they might not have kids. And when they pass away, whatever they have, all falls into a bucket, right? Like it falls into this pot, their house, their cars, their stuff, their, 401k. That could be, several $100,000. And if you're their like favorite, it's awesome. So, when you think about that, I want you to just take a minute. And I want you to just look at the list here. And I just want you to write down how many of those do you have in your organization? And I want you to add them up. I always wish we had the Jeopardy music to play. Get the 3. So, since I can't really see the online folks, if you want to put in the chat what your total was, that would be great. And in the room, is there anybody who had less than 10 when you totaled it up? Anybody that had less than 50 when you totaled it up? Anybody that had less than 100 when you totaled it up? Okay. Right, so that's a lot. 50 to 100 people, or more. That's a lot of potential prospects for having these conversations. This could keep you busy for a while. So, I hope that makes you feel encouraged Let's see what they said online. Oh, only 6, someone with 600, so less than 50, okay. So again, I mean, I guess if you have a very nascent or small organization, you could just only have a handful. You know, the board members, I mean, I would hope that you'd have at least 6 board members. I mean, your statutory minimum number of board members is 3. So, I mean, if you do only have 3, whenever the term is, you know, you'll have 3 more, so then you have 3 former board members, so then you'll get 6, but, but yeah, I mean, this will grow over time. But even if you only have a small number, I still think that it is, you know, something worth the conversation. Cause like I said, 3 times $35,000 average gift, they all said yes, still $100,000. Yeah. So knowing your people, most bequests come from people who are age 80, but that is not when they set their bequest up. Okay, so final will or trust, late 70s, but many people start doing this work much earlier than that. And the earlier you can get in somebody's will or beneficiary designation, the more likely that it's gonna stay. Okay, because it's just part of the plan, you know, something they get used to. So know who you're gonna reach out to with respect to that. I mean, if you have the 600, you should probably segment things a little bit. Doesn't hurt to start with people that are older, people that might have more wealth, but at the same time, I don't think you necessarily need to be restrictive in that way. Again, you just don't know exactly what people have anyway. So this is an important piece, you know, especially when you're in the hundreds of who you want to go reach out to. And again, I always think about like concentric circles, like who are the people that are like so good to my organization that I could go and ask them for anything, or maybe I just have to think about something and they get it and they come and tell me that they want to do that. You know, like maybe it's just that tight of a connection. Those BFFs are definitely the people I would start with, and then grow it from there and let the concentric circles until you get to the point where, you know, maybe everybody in your entire organization, well beyond the 600 potential prospects that were listed by the one organization, you know, everybody knows that you guys do plan giving and that might be something for them. So talked about that. And again, I mentioned marketing is not where you start. You know, one-on-one conversations is what works and where you definitely need to start. You can grow into the social media posts and the story sharing and all those kinds of things on the website or in other ways and market it more. But ultimately, the one-on-one conversations are where these gifts occur. Because what you're doing is you're connecting with their story, their legacy, what's important to them about what you and your organization do. And that's why sharing other people's stories is important. And I already mentioned this part, keep it simple but continuous. Yeah, you always try. It's always, I should never have to ask.
No, I mean, I can't,
Well,
it's all good.
yeah. So when you think about the process of engaging a donor around a planned gift, it's the same. You know, you're going to be respectful of their time. You need to schedule it. You need to be clear about why you're going to meet with them. You know, you want to make it a good thing for them. You need to be prepared. You know, that's part of why having those conversations with your organization and your board is so important, because they're gonna ask questions, and some of those are gonna come up in a minute. So I won't belabor that now, but yeah, think about it from their perspective. What would you ask if you were having this conversation? Receipt on the other end. You know, and what are you really intending when you go there? Are you just going to learn about them, get their story? Are you trying to assess their interest in this or solidify a connection? See if they have something already? Or are you actually going to make them, make an ask around a planned gift? That's important, because donors know when you come to them, that you have a purpose, and you want to be clear with them and with yourself. Again, this is typical donor interaction. Focus on them, listen, be respectful, thank them, talk about what your follow-up is going to be when you get back to the office, document, send a thank you note, make next steps.
Tom, do you have sort of a rule of thumb for airtime? Like, listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time. Do you have any of those rules of thumb? I always tell people, it's sometimes people, when they get nervous and they don't know how to have the planned giving conversation and they're with the donor, I always say, it's not what you say, it's what you ask. So if that one applies for cocktail parties and any kind of community event too, like if you don't want to talk, you just ask a question. And typically the person who you've asked the question of it was going to go on and on and on and on. And you've just bought yourself either an exit or air, quiet air time. So it's sometimes it's not what you say necessarily, it's what you ask. Also, was that in there?
It's a segue.
Oh my God, okay. And then, so just my other rule of thumb, I asked you, did you have them? Because I have them. And it's not what you say, it's what you ask. And I also say, it's sometimes can be difficult, but you're supposed to do only 20% of the talking. You need to be listening 80% of that. So when you go into those kinds of meetings with that mindset, I don't know, lifts the burden a little bit on you about, oh, I have to be able to know this or that or the other thing. You really don't. Just talk and listen. So.
And that's part of the being prepared. You want to be able to answer a question succinctly. We could all probably spend a lot of time talking about a lot of things and taking tangents from the actual question that gets asked, but to the 80-20 rule, the 90-10 rule, whatever rule you apply. But so the questions are important. And so what I'd really like to do at this point, and what we had prepared to do is to do some breakouts, but I think that
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes.
given the amount of content that's left, I think that what I'd just like to do is take a minute to think about these. So we're not going to do the breakout groups, Corey, but think about, have you received a planned gift? How did it go? I think that that's an important thing to consider. You know how it went. Whether it's causing angst or stumbling blocks to show up in your mind when you think about this, or if it went well. If you're just planning to start asking for planned gifts, what is the plan for that? What is? Yep.
So if you've sent out communications, are you interested in plan giving? And somebody comes back and says, yes, I am. So then that's what I would see as the opportunity where you would go ahead and ask them to, meet with them. Mm-hmm. Are there other times where I hadn't really even considered thinking about people and asking, like they haven't responded, but you think they might be So that's a different category. So there's the one, they've responded, okay, set up a meeting and have the conversation. But I never really thought about segmenting and thinking about, you know, who those volunteers or, you know, emotionally attached people are. And approaching them, even though they haven't indicated that they wanted to give a gift.
Right, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I think that if you're gonna do this, you know, have like a thought in the back of my mind all the time that every single nonprofit has a planned gift pointed towards them that they don't know about. Right, whether they've asked or not, or anything like that, I think that's just, every nonprofit's gonna get one at some point. So that's the default case. You know, obviously, if someone comes to talk to you about it because you put something out there about it, that's a great situation, you know. But yeah, you absolutely need to think about who to continue the conversation with. You need to think about this as a continuing conversation within your organization and with your board and with your constituents. And, you know, and that's just one person at a time. You know, so who that one person is next requires some thought and relationship building and interaction. And yeah, absolutely, I would say you should be connecting. And the reason is because you're giving them a gift, right? You're giving them the opportunity to do something that is transformational probably for them. You're giving them the opportunity to make potentially the biggest gift of their life that actually means something to them that's you know, incredible. So I think that, you know, so when you think about those discussion questions, you know, I would offer that me and my team, if you run into a stumbling block or you get stuck on what your plan is, or you know, weren't happy with how a conversation went, feel free to call us. You know, we're glad to talk you through that. You know, you're part of our community. That's what we're here to support. And whether you have a fund with us or a donor that's working with us or anything like that is irrelevant to that. So
I have a question about, because it is a long game, and it's not a donation that you're receiving in real time, that you are tracking or, you know, categorizing. So what is the like, okay, for me, as the executive director of a small organization, if someone says, I think what feels different is that it's just on their word. Like you were saying, they sign a thing that says, I will give, will become part of the legacy circle. So what is my responsibility then for tracking that? Or is it not? Do you just let it come in when it comes in the future, even though I'm not gonna be the director at that point? But there's like, how do you?
yeah, I mean, hopefully you have
plan giving.
yeah, hopefully you have a database, you know, and yeah, definitely like you put that form in the database, you code them as a legacy, you know, member. And, you know, we do at least an annual thing where we reach out to them. You know, so yeah, I think that it would be something that the next executive director would want to know who's on that list, you know. And obviously when somebody passes away, you'll find out.
And do you follow up when someone passes away, or do you just wait until the gift comes?
So if it's something that we know is kind of baked in, like a life insurance, you know, beneficiary, you know, if we don't hear from an advisor in a couple of months' time, we might reach out and say, hey, you know, we saw that this person passed away and we had been told that there was going to be a beneficiary gift from their whatever. You know, they may say, well, that got changed, or yeah, we need to get that paperwork out, you know. But you know, oftentimes, you know, if we see that somebody was in our legacy society and they pass away, you know, we'll have our attorney pull the notice of probate if we haven't got, you know, like if it's been a few months and we didn't get the notice. And if we're not in there, then obviously something changed.
So in LA, that no, all probate records are public records. And so you can march over the courthouse and check it out on the computer, or we have online access. So things get filed electronically. So because probate records are public, we can find out where things are in the estate, or if a representative has been appointed, or all kinds of things about the steps along the way. I would just say, back to your first question about what do I do? What's my responsibility? I think it's important to document. I think it's important to have in your database, just like other relevant information about donors' wishes and things that they are interested in and not interested in, hope for the organization and not. You don't really have any kind of duty. Only like Syracuse University gets the book Planned Gifts as part of their capital campaign. Like literally there's these formulas about planned giving, and you'll find in it like $1 billion capital campaign, about a third of it gets booked, and they're all like planned gifts. And so you're like, hey, how's that fair to book that for your capital campaign? But it is. You don't get to book any of that. And then I would say, Tom says the community foundation has a donor who is involved. Just kind of have a special note to make sure that that person gets included, right? As things come up that you just remember to keep your planned giving society people in your in the forefront of your mind, because it may be a planned gift now, but it could be a QCD with their qualified charitable distribution from their IRA, because they need to take the minimum distribution, don't need the money, don't want to have to pay tax and then give to charity. Like you'll find that the more engagement and involvement and conversation, that kind of quiet planned giving donor might become a more active donor if they're more active with your organization and they like what's going on.
So it's super important that your organization, should you decide to go start talking with people about planned gifts, even if it's just you doing it as like one person, it's important that you create a script. If you want what you deliver to be something that you work on and improve, and you also want it to be consistently delivered to the people that you're interacting with. And lastly, you also want to be good at it. So you should practice.
Practice with your colleague.
Yeah, practice with a coworker, practice with a board member, practice with, whoever. And ultimately, really, there's value in being on the other side of it too. So if there are more than one person doing this, role play the other side, because you'll actually feel the feelings. Like when they ask you, a great starting question for any planned giving interaction is, why did you first become involved with us? And then 45 minutes later, but like that is, and when you are asked that question and you say that, like it just, you will feel what they're feeling. And that practice is what will give you the confidence of knowing that what you're going to deliver to them, even if the only thing that comes out of that time together is that they're going to get a connection to something valuable, a part of them that's valuable. That may be the only thing that comes out of it, but it still was worth the hour for them. So yeah, I was going to have you pair off and practice that. But so if you're going to do these conversations, your script could literally be as simple as, why did you first become involved with this? It's so great to hear your story. We're starting to work on growing our planned gifts and building an endowment. Is that something you'd be interested in learning more about?
Or do you know how planned gifts are different than what we have been doing so far? Right? Maybe they don't know the word planned gift, because anybody's going to jump at planned gift, because remember, they're never going to die. It's easy to satisfy, right?
We actually have a joke that anybody that does a CGA or a CRT, well, actually a CGA, most typically because we're on the hook for that no matter how long they live.
Charitable
It
gift to
basically
community.
adds 10 years to your life if you do a CGA.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Inside philanthropic humor, right?
So, other questions, what do you hope that our organization looks like in the future? Again, build your script around questions like this. And then consider that when you practice, what did you observe? How did that make you feel? Make it consistent, repeatable, and internalized. So it's not like, so that they don't think you're reading a script off the inside of your eyelids. And be ready with questions, right? So kind of just, finishing up here because we've only got about 2 minutes left. So they may ask you, well, how is my gift going to be used? Who manages your endowment? How do I know you'll do what I want? What's your goal? Who else has done this? Should I talk to my advisor? The answer to that is yes. Do I have to, or do I get to use my name? You're going to get both of those. People that want to be anonymous to people that really want to be recognized.
And this slide or that last slide, the 38, is great because when you think, oh my goodness, how can I do my homework for this? What are the questions I need to know the answer to? This is your cheat sheet. Know the answers to these questions. All the other stuff, you can go with my little rule of thumb of it's what you ask. It's not what you say. But here you're going to have to know the answers to these questions.
So there's other special situations where you might want to partner with us or a consultant of some kind. We talked about some of these already. I just, wanted to highlight them. And again, you'll get a copy of these slides. No matter where you are, your community foundation is a great resource to help you with this work. Back to what we said in the beginning, what's the best time to plant a tree 30 years ago, or today. So it's important to, if you can, to start doing this now. Make a plan, meet with donors, and ask them to help you by making a planned gift. So it really can be straightforward and feel manageable.
I think you'll find that your board is probably going to be pretty excited about it and having some conversations. There's always on a board somebody who just loves to go out and talk to people about the organization and ask those questions. And you can have a wingman or wing person on these conversations, involving your board and having it like a tag team. Like even today, Tom and I love it that we sit here and talk to each other and talk to you and may the best idea win. But it doesn't always have to be exclusively staff driven, right? It can be a friend of the organization, one of your donors who really wants you to go and talk to their friend, colleague. So, the more the merrier, not too many, usually 2 is the right number. But it's just, again, it's like the long game. It's the marathon. It's having this always as a card you can offer. I just think it's, I don't know, I think it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for letting us share about this conversation. I'm not positive we got to every single one of these, but I think we at least touched on them a little bit. And I would offer, and I think Christine's the same, that if you have follow-up questions or things you want to talk about in a more detailed way, either with your whole organization or with your board or with smaller groups, whatever, next steps make sense for you, we're glad to support. So thank you.
Just one thing to your question about, just going after people. We've been doing